will happen again on Earth when the moon opens up. Since ancient times, the moon has been characterized as a technical creation, since there are recorded historical phrases where its existence does not exist in the sky of the Earth, according to astronomer archaeologist George Papageorgiou. Democritus and Anaxagoras, the ancient Greeks, taught that there was a time when the Earth was without a moon. There are even modern testimonies for the existence of a vacuum under the crust of the moon, that the moon is hollow. Recently, scientists have even spoken of a mysterious round structure under the Sea of Galilee. It's indeed the only celestial body which does not make the movements of all the other known planets. That is, our moon does not make movements of other known planets, and there's other moons or satellites, while its size is just proportionate for a satellite of our Earth. Modern Russian scientists have recently prepared a plan where it will be possible for people to live inside specially designed balloons in the voids where they exist below the surface of the moon. There does not exist that fatally dangerous for man radiation, and the force of gravity is proportional to that to which the Earthlings are used to. On the lunar surface, they will be able to go out exclusively with a spacesuit. In the beginning was chaos, according to Hesiod, but three elements coexisted: chaos, Gaia, and love. Love does not give birth, but encourages and facilitates birth and creation. From chaos were born Erebus and the night, while their children were ether and day. Though you first gave birth to chaos and Gaia, broad-breasted is the safe haven of all the immortals who have the grace of Olympus, Tartarus, the air-crested man of the wide world, Eros, who is beautiful in immortality, the goddess Elismeli of all gods and all men, is damned in setting law and insolent will, according to Hesiod's Theogony 116 to 122. Chaos is the personification of the primordial void, which precedes creation, when order had not yet been imposed on the elements of the world. Aristotle wrote that Arcadia, before it was inhabited by the Greeks, Arcadia of course meaning the Peloponnese, had a Pelasgian population, and that these natives inhabited this region from a very distant time when there was still no moon in the sky. For this reason, he also called them Proselinis, before the moon, that is. Apollonius of Rhodia mentioned the time when all the moving bodies in the sky did not exist, before the races of Danae and Deucalion appeared, and there were only the Arcadians who were said to dwell on the mountains and feed on acorns before the existence of the moon. We have similar references from Plutarch, Ovid, Hippolytus, Lucian, Censorinus, and apparently even in South America, symbols found on the walls of the forecourt of Calasaya near the city of Tiwanaku in Bolivia record the moon first appearing about 12,000 years ago. The appearance of the moon is said to have caused great upheavals on Earth in the form of earthquakes, massive floods, and climatic changes. Interestingly, this distant region has been proposed by some scholars as the actual site of Plato's mythical Atlantis, and this great planetary upheaval as a cataclysmic event that destroyed Atlantis. A similar change today could cause the Earth's magnetic poles to shift, with similar devastating results for our modern planet. The Greek-born Lucian from Samosata in Syria lived in 120 AD. In his book True History, he gives surprising information because it was impossible for a person to know at that time. And to understand, we read on, he said, he went in a ship, a craft that was carried by the wind for 7 days and nights, and on the 8th day he reached the moon. In other words, this was a spacecraft. This is what modern spaceships do today to go to the moon. And they said he went into a well that had mirrors on top and could see the whole Earth. King of the moon was Endymion, who was taken from the earth and taken to the moon and made king. He describes 3-engined airships, 3-headed flying vultures. He describes modern telescopes. Quote, they put in and take out their eyes that anyone could wear and see very far, end quote. In other words, like a scope. He describes warriors in a spacesuit that had 2 horned antennas. Also, it describes journeys to the stars of the zodiac, as well as landing at sea, the same as that of contemporary cosmonauts, and in fact in the Bermuda area. And finally, he describes a war between the inhabitants of the moon and Sirius, which he mentions he had visited. Quote, aerial battles were fought and terrible weapons were used, and the Syrians won, end quote. The Greek philosophers in general knew a lot about the moon and dealt with it a lot. Thales, who is considered the father of Greek and world philosophy, was the first to say that the moon received light from the sun, and the first to calculate that the diameter as well as the trajectory of it. Theophanes mentions that his teacher, Socrates, criticized it, quote, a great hollow sphere inside which there are seas and land, inhabited by people like us, end quote. Words of Socrates that are also supported by modern astronomers today. Pythagoras recounts that he circled the moon in the vehicles of the gods who resided there, and mentions that the lunar day is 15 times longer than the Earth's, which it is. Pythagoras also insisted that the moon was inhabited by beings divinely similar to humans, but taller, fairer, and more beautiful, far more beautiful. All the knowledge of Pythagoras, the mathematicians, music, geometry, physics, he declared to be knowledge he got from the celestials with whom he had constant contact. He called them Atlanteans and extraterrestrial, Hyperboreans actually. Now, we also have many references to the moon from texts from Greek mythology that refer to gods and demigods. The Greek god Orpheus, son of Apollo, the most regular traveler of the moon and Sirius, tells us, quote, the moon has mountains, states, and houses. Its surface is soil like the earth and inhabited by divine societies, end quote. Orpheus knew the 12-month lunar calendar and the phases of the moon. He talks about the rotation of the earth around the sun, the temperate, tropical, and polar zones of the earth, eclipses of the moon, solstices, equinoxes, planetary movements, and universal gravity, and claims that the inhabitants of the moon are who wandered from planet to planet. All these claims of Orpheus are mentioned in ancient texts of Plutarch and Diogenes of Laertius. Much information from ancient texts also comes to us about the Telchinus of Rhodes and the Kaveri of Samothrace, who disappeared according to legend after the Great Flood. Their technological development was such that it allowed them to leave the earth and save themselves on the moon or Mars in bases used by the gods during the colonization of the earth. Nonnus mentions that Phaethon made 30 revolutions around the moon, traveled to Venus, and often visited the earth's poles. Dionysus, Artemis, who was Apollo's sister, and Hercules had traveled to the moon, and Aethmon traveled there in his chariot, craft that is, that looked like a lightning comet, giving precise information about the unseen side of the moon, something modern man did just a few years ago. We had never seen the far side of the moon until a few years ago. So in conclusion, we will have to wait for developments from the technical satellite of our Earth. All the evidence converges that some eye is watching us from up there. Please leave your comments about this, and thank you for your support. Please support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.